Elena Voss finished her shift at the clinic a little after midnight, the way she always did. The town was quiet by then, the streetlights humming over empty roads, the air cool enough to fog her breath. She pulled her coat tighter and walked, not toward her apartment, but toward the tree line at the edge of town, where the old mill stood abandoned and half swallowed by weeds. She had been making this walk for 3 months now, every night, without fail. It had started on a whim. She had heard whimpering behind the mill one evening while walking home, and when she followed the sound, she found 3 small pups curled together in the dirt, shivering, thin, and afraid. No mother in sight, no sign of a den, just 3 little creatures who looked like they had been alone for a long time. She should have called someone, an animal shelter maybe, or animal control. But something about the way they looked at her, not with fear, but with something closer to hope, made her kneel down instead and offer them the sandwich from her bag. They had eaten like they hadn't eaten in days. She came back the next night with more food, and the next after that. Somewhere in those first few weeks, the pups stopped hiding from her and started waiting for her, 3 small shapes pressed against the mill's crumbling wall, ears lifting the moment they heard her footsteps. She never told anyone. She wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe because they felt like a secret worth keeping, something soft and hers, in a life that hadn't had much softness in it. She had lost her own mother young, had grown up mostly on her own, and there was something about the pups' small, trusting faces that filled a space in her she hadn't realized was empty. She named them, even though she told herself she shouldn't get attached. The boldest one, always first to eat, she called Bram. The smallest, who liked to hide behind his siblings, she called Wren. And the one with the strange amber eyes, the one who watched her longer than the others, who seemed almost to understand her when she spoke, she called Talia. Tonight was no different. She reached the mill and found them waiting, 3 sets of eyes catching the moonlight. She smiled and lowered herself to the ground, already reaching into her bag. "Hello, my loves," she said softly, as she always did. "Did you miss me?" Bram nearly knocked her over with excitement. Wren pressed close to her side, small and warm. Talia waited a beat longer than the others, before finally leaning into her, resting her head against Elena's knee, with a small sound that was almost a sigh. Elena didn't know that 50 miles away, a man had not slept properly in months. Cain Ashgrove was the alpha of the Blackthorn pack, a position he had inherited far too young and carried like a stone around his neck, ever since the night his brother and sister-in-law were killed. The attack had come from a rival pack, swift and merciless, striking the outer border where his brother's family had been living. By the time Cain's enforcers arrived, the house was empty and burning, and there was no trace of his brother's 3 children, Bram, Wren, and Talia, ages 6, 4, and 5. For months, Cain had led the search himself. He had walked every mile of packland, sent trackers into neighboring territories, called in favors from allied packs, and slept, when he slept at all, with a map of the region spread across his desk, red circles marking every place they had already searched and come up empty. His pack's healer, an old wolf named Mira, who had raised Cain himself after his own parents passed, had tried gently to prepare him for what seemed like the only possible truth. "They're pups, Cain," she had said, not unkindly, laying a hand on his shoulder. "Pups that young, alone this long, without pack, without protection. I know you don't want to hear it, but you have led this pack through grief before. You may need to lead it through this too." Cain had not answered her. He had only turned back to his map. He would not let himself believe it, not while there was still ground he hadn't covered. That was why, when one of his trackers came to him just after dawn, with an unfamiliar scent trail near the old mill on the edge of town, Cain was on his feet before the man had finished speaking. "It's faint," the tracker warned. "Might be nothing. There's pup scent mixed in with something else, something human. Soap, milk maybe. It's old, layered, like it's been happening again and again, not just once." "Show me," Cain said. He went alone. He told no one else, not even Mira, because some small, aching part of him could not bear for anyone to witness his hope, if it turned out, once again, to be nothing. The mill came into view just as the sun began to sink behind the hills, the sky bruising orange and purple at the edges, Cain moved through the trees in silence, senses sharp, heart hammering harder than it had in months. And then he saw her. A woman, kneeling in the dirt behind the old building, her coat pooled around her, a canvas bag open at her side. And curled around her, pressed against her knees, her side, her lap, 3 small wolf pups, eating from her hand, nuzzling into her palms, one of them resting its head against her leg, with the kind of trust that could not be taught, only earned. Cain stopped breathing. He knew those pups. He would know them anywhere, in any form. The boldest one had his brother's exact stance, weight forward, chin high, even as a pup. The smallest one had his sister-in-law's ears, the same slight tilt when she listened, and the one with amber eyes, Talia, had eyes so like his brother's that for a moment, Cain's knees nearly buckled beneath him. They were alive. They were alive, and they were here, and they were curled trustingly around a human woman who was humming something low and soft under her breath, running her fingers gently behind Wren's ears. Cain did not know how long he stood there, frozen at the edge of the trees, simply watching. Long enough that the sky deepened further into evening, long enough that his chest ached from holding back the sound that wanted to break out of him, relief and grief and joy so tangled together he couldn't tell where one ended and another began. He should have announced himself calmly. He should have approached with care, the way any alpha would when startling pups who had clearly been alone and frightened for a long time. But 3 months of searching, 3 months of nearly giving up, 3 months of Mira's gentle, sorrowful eyes, it all rose up in him at once, and he stepped forward without meaning to, a low sound of disbelief escaping him before he could stop it. The pups went rigid. Elena felt it before she understood it, the sudden tension in the small bodies pressed against her, the way all 3 pups snapped their heads toward the tree line at once. She turned to look, and that was when she saw him. A tall man standing at the edge of the woods, still as stone, staring at the pups with an expression she couldn't read. Not menace exactly, something rawer than that. "Stay back," she said instantly, rising to her feet, placing herself between the man and the pups without a second of hesitation. Her heart pounded, but her voice came out steady. She had spent years working nights in a clinic that saw its share of trouble. She knew how to sound calm even when she wasn't. The pups, startled and afraid, did something they had never done in front of her before. They shifted. It happened in the space of a breath, fur receding, small bodies stretching and reshaping. And where 3 wolf pups had been a moment before, there now knelt 3 frightened children, huddled together in the dirt, their eyes wide and human and terrified. Elena's breath caught in her throat. For one disorienting second, the world seemed to tilt sideways. But whatever shock moved through her, it lasted only that 1 second. Because whatever these children were, however impossible what she had just seen might be, they were still the same 3 small beings who had trusted her every night for 3 months. Still hers, in every way that had come to matter. She dropped to her knees again immediately, gathering all 3 of them into her arms, angling her body toward the stranger like a shield. "Whoever you are," she said, voice shaking now but not backing down, "you are not touching them." Cain's chest cracked wide open. He had come prepared to fight, if it came to that. To fight anything standing between him and his brother's children. He had not been prepared for this. A human woman, small and unarmed, placing her body between an alpha king and 3 shifter children, as though she would face him down with nothing but her bare hands if she had to. "Mama," one of the children said suddenly, small and frightened, burying his face against Elena's shoulder. It was Bram. He said it without thinking, the way he always did now when he was scared, the word slipping out the way it had every night for the past several weeks, whispered only after Elena had tucked a blanket she'd brought from home around their small, shivering bodies and hummed them to sleep. Cain went very still. He understood, in that moment, everything he had missed while he was out searching every mile of land he could think to search. His brother's children had not simply survived. They had been found, not by trackers, not by pack, not by him, but by a human woman with no idea what they were, who had knelt in the dirt every single night and fed them and cleaned their small wounds and sung to them until they slept, until 3 orphaned pups, who had lost everything, found, in her, something to hold on to. She had done what his entire pack, with all its strength and all its searching, had not been able to do. She had kept them safe. She had kept them whole. She had, in every way that mattered, become their mother. Cain lowered himself slowly to his knees in the dirt, the way he had not knelt for anyone since the day he took his father's place as alpha. He kept his hands open and visible, his movements slow and unthreatening, the posture of a man surrendering, not commanding. "My name is Cain," he said quietly. "These children are my brothers. I have been searching for them since the night he died. I am not here to take them from you." Elena's arms tightened around the three small bodies pressed against her, but something in the man's voice, in the way his eyes shone too bright in the fading light, made her hesitate before answering. "Then why are you here?" she asked. "Because I need you," Cain said simply. "They need you. Whatever you've given them these past months, I cannot replace it. I don't want to replace it. I'm asking you to come home with us, not as a stranger who found them, as their mother, because that is what you have become, and I will not pretend otherwise, not even for a moment." Talia lifted her head from Elena's shoulder, amber eyes finding Cain's face for the first time, studying him with the same quiet intensity she always turned on Elena. Something in her small features softened, some flicker of memory or instinct, recognizing kinship even though she could not have explained how. "Uncle," she whispered. Cain's composure finally broke. He pressed a hand briefly to his eyes, and when he lowered it, his voice was rough. "Yes," he said, "I'm your uncle. I've been looking for you for so long." Elena looked between the three children she loved, and the man kneeling in front of her, grief and hope written plainly across his face, and she understood, with a certainty that settled deep in her chest, that this was not a threat to what she had built with these children. It was an extension of it. A family reaching back for the pieces of itself it had feared were lost forever, and finding, instead, that those pieces had been kept safe by someone willing to hold them until they could be found. "All right," she said softly, looking down at the three small faces watching her with the same trust they had shown her from the very first night. "We'll go together, all of us." Weeks later, the pack house at Blackthorn had grown used to the sound of Elena's voice humming through its halls each evening, the same soft tune she had once sung behind an abandoned mill to three frightened orphaned pups. Now she sang it while tucking Bram, Wren, and Talia into a bed built for children who finally had somewhere safe to sleep. Cain stood in the doorway most nights, watching, the way he watched now instead of searching. He was no longer a man haunted by empty land and cold trails. He was a man watching his family made whole again, held together not by pack law or bloodline alone, but by a woman who had knelt in the dirt every night and loved three lost children until someone finally came to bring them home, and found, in doing so, that she had never truly been a stranger to them at all. She had always been exactly what they called her, their mother.